you all had a blessed Easter. And turning now to the Easter account of Luke's Gospel. The first point, Jesus dies in verse 46 of Luke chapter 23. 2. In response to what was done, quote, what was done, unquote, the centurion confesses Jesus was a righteous man. The third point, Joseph of Arimathea, who was apparently on the Sanhedrin, got the body of Jesus buried in his tomb in accord with Pilate's permission. Point 4, Galilean women and others came to the tomb. Point 5, they didn't find Jesus there, but they did find two angels inside the tomb without the body of Jesus being in there. Point 6, the women leave, then tell the disciples Jesus is back amongst the living. Point 7, the women leave, then tell the disciples Jesus is back amongst the living. That's point 6. Point 7, the disciples doubted their testimony, the testimony of the women. Peter went to the tomb to check for himself. 8, the Emmaus Road incident happens. There's some disciples, two disciples. I think one of them was named Cleopas, if I remember correctly. They're walking on the road to Emmaus. Jesus appears to them. They don't recognize him at first, and then it goes on from there. Point 9, the disciples from the Emmaus Road went to the apostles in the upper room to tell them Jesus was alive. During this proclamation in the upper room, Jesus appears to them all in the upper room. Point 10, he talks to them for a while and also eats some food, some broiled fish, and some honeycomb. Me one honeycomb. And finally, point 11, later on, Jesus takes his followers to Bethany. While there, he blesses them and then ascends to heaven. Now, if Jesus was the Son of God, then he would also be a righteous man. Or, the centurion confessed both the righteousness and the sonhood of Jesus. Next, Mark doesn't say that there was only one angel in the tomb, and Matthew doesn't comment one way or the other, so there is no problem on that point. It is important to note that the ascension occurs in Bethany, not Galilee. Moreover, there is no reason I'm aware of to suppose that the Bethany meeting was immediately after the upper room appearance. While it occurs immediately after in the text, that does not mean that it happened immediately after in real time. In Matthew, Jesus meets with the disciples in Galilee, and he gives them the Great Commission, going to all the world, preaching, baptizing, etc. That is not what's happening here in Bethany at the time of the ascension. A lot of people get those confused. So the ascension not in Galilee, in Bethany, and the Great Commission not in Bethany, in Galilee. And then, as I was saying, Luke, he's describing Jesus in the upper room, talking to the disciples, and then it says, and he led them to a place in Bethany, and blessed them, ascended to heaven, and so on. So, while it seems like this is happening immediately after the upper room, it does not explicitly say that it is, and there's no reason to suppose that it is. It doesn't say immediately after that Jesus took them to Bethany. It says, and Jesus took them to Bethany. So it could have been, well, apparently it was about 50 days later or so. Alright, I guess we got enough time to squeeze in John. In chapter 19, verse 30, that's where Jesus passes away in John's Gospel. 2, the soldiers were going to break Jesus' legs so he would die before the Sabbath, but found that he was already dead, so they didn't break his legs, because apparently that would make him suffocate quicker on the cross, asphyxiate. To make sure that he was dead and that breaking of the legs was not necessary, they pierced his side with a spear. Blood and water flowed out of his side. Point 3, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus bury the body of Jesus in the garden tomb with Pilate's permission. Point 4, Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb early on Sunday morning and finds the stone rolled away. 5, the body isn't there, so she goes and gets Peter and John, who come to check it out. John believes Christ rose from the dead when he sees the empty tomb and the grave clothes and so on, and the shroud of Tehran perhaps as well, if you think that's legitimate. When Mary comes back to the tomb, apparently her second trip was with Peter and John as they were coming to check it out. She finds that there are 2 angels in the tomb as she returns to it. Then she sees Jesus, excuse me, but does not recognize him at first. She mistakes him for the gardener, but then realizes it is him. Jesus tells her not to touch him. Point 7, Jesus appears to his disciples in the upper room, but Thomas isn't there. When Thomas returns, he does not believe the disciples' testimony about Jesus. About a week later, Jesus comes back to the upper room while Thomas is there, and now Thomas believes as well. And finally, point 8, after this, Jesus appears a third time to his disciples. They do not realize it is him until he tells them to cast their fishing net on the other side of the boat. And that happened, I believe, at the beginning of John. Peter was fishing with his brother, and he'd been fishing all day, couldn't catch any fish. Jesus tells him to cast on the other side. So this is kind of a repeat performance of that. At that point, they do recognize him as Jesus. They come to the land where Jesus is. They row their boat ashore or what have you and eat with him. Finally, Jesus talks to Peter about feeding the sheep. That's a very important conversation. 3 times. Do you love me? And Peter says yes. Jesus says, therefore feed my sheep. Alright, so we'll have to take that outline, save it for the next video, and then we can compare it to our outlines of the other 3 Gospels, of the Synoptic Gospels. So that will be coming in the next video of the series.